So, on behalf of Milan, I wish you a very good morning to all of you. And welcome you to the today's webinar on HIV and kidney. As all of you know, after the introduction of and availability of highly active antiretroviral therapy, HIV patients are living long. However, comorbidity is something we cannot ignore. One such important topic is HIV and kidney. It's a pleasure to today have Dr. M. Satyanarayana as a speaker to throw some light on that. Dr. M. Satyanarayana is a senior consultant physician, HIV specialist, and a diabetes physician. His mission is to provide basic healthcare needs to all needy individuals and in the community. He was trained in HIV medicine in National AIDS Control Organization Delhi, also in reputed universities like South Florida University, Johns Hopkins University, and Harvard University. He is also a life member of AIDS Society of India and life member of HIV Medicine Association of India. It's my pleasure to have sir today, and it's now all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I start?
Yes, sir. It's all yours.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Mr. Brindana Sinha, for your kind introductory remarks. At the outset, I thank Milan for giving me this opportunity to talk on management of chronic kidney disease in HIV infected through this webinar. In the present day scenario, this topic is having a major clinical significance in the people living with HIV and AIDS because it is associated with significant morbidity and mortality. The prevalence of chronic kidney disease in HIV infected is rising in resource-rich and resource-poor countries, despite the widespread use of antiretroviral therapy. It is important to note that the pattern of kidney disease now in HIV infected has been changed. Previously, we used to see more of HIV-associated nephropathy or acute kidney injuries related to opportunistic infections and antiretroviral drug toxicities. Now, CKD in HIV is often related to non-infectious comorbids, particularly like diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. In the coming 15 minutes of my talk, I touch a little bit of epidemiology, pathogenesis, and various etiologies of chronic kidney disease in HIV in the first 10 minutes. In the latter 15 minutes, I discuss various monitoring modalities of renal function. Subsequently, I shall explain different antiretroviral regimens, various ARVs, and their nephrotoxicities and dose adjustments. Finally, for a few minutes, we go through the management issues of chronic kidney disease in HIV affected. Coming to the one minute. Technical problem.
Okay. It is working fine, sir. Please continue.
Actually, I'm searching for a pointer. Yeah, pointer is visible now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let us begin by knowing two important definitions of today's talk. The first one is chronic kidney disease, and another one is markers of renal failure. Chronic kidney disease is defined as abnormalities of kidney disease, kidney structure or function present more than 3 months with implications on health. So next come to markers of renal failure. Markers of renal failure include proteinuria, electrolyte abnormalities due to tubular dysfunction, tissue abnormalities detected by histology, and structural abnormalities detected by imaging like ultrasonogram and CT scans. If GFR persists less than 60 ml per minute per 1.73 square meter body surface area for more than 3 months, it constitutes chronic kidney disease even in the absence of renal failure markers. It means, in spite of normal creatinine values of 1.2 or 1 milligram per deciliter in male and female sexes respectively, if GSR is less than 60 ml per minute for 3 months, please remember it constitutes renal failure. Next, coming to the epidemiology of the chronic kidney disease. HIV-associated nephropathy and HIV immune complex kidney disease comprises the two major categories of HIV-related kidney disease with 49% and 30% of the total CKDs in HIV infected respectively. Antiretroviral drug-induced nephropathy contributes to about 6% of total cases. The other causes includes amyloidosis for 1%, diabetic nephropathy for 3%, membranous glomerulonephritis for 6%, and miscellaneous comes to 5%. Compared with general population, HIV-infected patients have increasingly higher CKD prevalence rates up to 9.7% as per the GFR criteria. In some recent studies in Africa, much higher prevalence of chronic kidney disease, as high as 44%, is also reported as per the GFR criteria. Prevalence of CKD in HIV infected is 3 to 5 times higher than HIV uninfected persons as per the albuminuria criteria of more than 30 grams per day. So this picture, this direct effect of HIV, this picture shows ongoing HIV replication directly affecting the kidneys. Evidence derived from numerous studies in the past says HIV can cause direct damage to different organs of the body, including the kidneys, in addition to suppressing the immunity by depriving the by depriving, is it okay? Hello? Evidence, hello? Evidence derived from numerous studies says HIV can cause a direct damage to different organs of the body, including kidneys, in addition to suppressing the immunity by depriving the CD4 populations. The other organs affected directly by HIV are heart, brain, liver. Hello?
Right, just subtitle stop.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir, you are very audible.
Hello?
Sir. Please continue. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, there is some technical problem. It seems, I mean, my screen is going, coming. Okay, na?
Yes, sir, we can hear you very clearly, sir.
Okay. CKD, classification of CKD in HIV. CKD is broadly classified into 3 categories. Chronic kidney disease due to HIV-associated nephropathy. It is a classic disease first described way back in 1984 in the beginning of HIV epidemic. It mostly occurs in African black race and constitutes nearly about 49 to 50% of total chronic kidney diseases in HIV infected. Under the non-HIV-AN CKDs, HIV immune complex kidney disease comprises a diverse group of immune-mediated glomerulonephritis, including immune complex glomerulonephritis, IgA nephropathy, and lupus-like glomerulonephritis. These accounts to about 30% of total CKDs in biopsy series. Other diseases reported in biopsy series comes to about 21%. These include thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis associated with Hep B, Hep C co-infections, diabetic nephropathy, hypertensive glomerulosclerosis, acute tubular necrosis, interstitial nephritis, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, chronic pyelonephritis, amyloidosis of the kidney, and of course ARV-induced nephropathy. Spectrum of CKD in HIV infected is changing now. Less of HIV-associated nephropathy, more of non-infectious comorbid CKD like diabetic nephropathy, hypertensive kidney disease, etc. Few words about the etiology of HIV-associated nephropathy, which is also popularly called as HIVAN. The risk of chronic kidney disease in HIV infected is strongly influenced by race, as we know. HIV-associated nephropathy, as I mentioned earlier, predominantly occurs in African descent. There is about 18 to 50%, 50-fold higher risk of chronic kidney disease in Africans when compared to Asians. As per the recent emerging data, in the black race, there is a strong genetic polymorphic predisposition in the gene risk alleles on chromosome 22 that encode the lipoprotein 1, which is associated with development of HIV-associated nephropathy disproportionately in Africans. These lipoprotein risk alleles are found in 70 to 80% of Africans, and these same alleles genes are also associated with trichosomal infections in the African continent. HIV-associated nephropathy is characterized clinically by proteinuria without hematuria, rapid glomerular filtration rate decline, and echogenic kidneys in ultrasonogram. HIV-AN can occur at any CD4 count. Ongoing viral replication directly causes the renal injury. Extremely uncommon in virologically suppressed. So, HIVAN, antiretroviral treatment, if you initiate very early, preserves the renal function and prolongs the survival. ART should be started in HIV-associated nephropathy regardless of CD4 count. Let us have a look at histopathology of HIV-associated nephropathy. Histologically, HIV-associated nephropathy causes both glomerular and tubular changes. Here, glomerular, tubular in the nephron. It is characterized by collapsing focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, microcystic tubular dilatation. These are the microcystic tubular dilatation, and tubulointestinal inflammation by macrophages and T lymphocytes. Here, no mesangial cells are involved. Coming to HIV immune complex kidney disease, which is briefly called also as CIDIS. It is histologically characterized by immune complexes comprised of antibodies bound to HIV antigens that are deposited on capillary loops and in the mesangium. Complement activation may result in lupus-like pathology in the kidney without the other systematic or serologic features of lupus nephritis. In contrast to HIV-associated nephropathy, the renal cell proliferation predominantly affects the mesangial cells, leading to mesangial expansion. Tubulointestinal inflammation is also common with immune complex disease, but this involves a mixture of macrophages, eosinophils, and B lymphocytes, unlike T lymphocytes in HIV associated nephropathy. I think you understand it's difficult. Let us have a look at risk factors for CKD in HIV infection. As we already discussed, the risk of CKD is increased in individuals infected with HIV compared with general population. In Africans, the risk of developing chronic kidney disease is of the same magnitude of diabetes. Premature presentation of age-related comorbidities like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension in HIV patients in turn contributes to the increased risk of developing chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease and proteinuria are independent risk factors for cardiovascular disease in HIV infection. This table shows various risk factors. These are various risk factors. And their relative risk ranges in CKD with GFR less than 60 ml per minute and in end-stage kidney disease with GFR less than 15 ml per minute. These risk factors are African descent, female sex, family history of end-stage renal disease, advanced age, diabetes, hypertension, low CD4 count, high viral loads, hepatitis C co-infection, of course, these antiretrovirals like NNRTI, tenofovir, and protease inhibitors, indinavir, atazanavir, and lopinavir. Next, coming to the very important topic, coming to the monitoring of the kidney. Why should we monitor kidney function at all? The reason is early identification of the patients at high risk for chronic kidney disease. Early diagnosis of CKD is very, very crucial to improve the patient outcome as of us know. Once established chronic kidney disease, it usually progresses and may result in end-stage kidney disease where the patient becomes dependent on maintenance hemodialysis or kidney transplantation. The progression of chronic kidney disease may be slowed down with early detection and management of renal failure. These are the goals of regular monitoring of kidney. To identify the kidney disease early for an effective treatment and to detect the drug toxicities in the beginning itself and change the drug regimen. And to establish the glomerular filtration rate at baseline for proper dose adjustment of antiretroviral drugs. The diagnostic evaluation of chronic kidney disease in an HIV-infected individual should be performed with various investigations mentioned in this slide to rule out HIV-associated nephropathy, immune complex kidney diseases, nephrotic effects of antiretroviral drugs, and hepatitis B, hepatitis C co-infection. Initial evaluation should be done with a thorough clinical examination with regular blood pressure monitoring. So investigations like complete blood picture, blood sugar, fasting and postprandial, urine analysis, protein creatinine ratio, or 24 hours creatinine urinary protein excretion, glomerular filtration rate estimation, and markers of proximal renal tubular dysfunction. And you have to perform a renal ultrasonogram, hepatitis B, hepatitis C screening, markers of proximal tubular dysfunction when the patient is on tenofovir with worsening renal function. So when to refer a nephrologist? So nephrology referral should be considered to establish diagnosis with biopsy in patients with markers of severe disease and with significant reduction of glomerular filtration rate that is more than 25 ml per baseline or less than 60 ml per minute or albuminuria of more than 300 milligram per day or hematuria combined with proteinuria with recent increase in blood pressure. These are the situations where we have to refer to a nephrologist. In day-to-day clinical practice, serum creatinine is most frequently used renal biochemical parameter. It is not so reliable to assess the renal function precisely. Muscle mass, age, sex, race, and diet influences the value. Even though the radioisotope renogram is the gold standard to calibrate the correct renal function, but it is not practicable because of cost and complexity involved. glomerular filtration is most widely used index parameter of kidney function, as of all us know. Glomerular filtration rate should be estimated by using anthropometric readings, clinical data, creatinine values, and cystatin C values. Glomerular filtration rate should be calculated in all HIV patients at the time of initiation of treatment, at switching of the ARV regimes, or at least once in 2 years in stable HIV patients. Next important parameter of kidney function is quantitative measurements of proteinuria. It should be done at baseline and when the ARP is changed, or at least once annually in stable HIV patients. More frequent monitoring is necessary for patients with additional risk factors like tenofovir usage, something like those conditions. These are the commonly used glomerular filtration rate estimating equations. These are calculated on the basis of, as I told in the earlier slide, it is based on the anthropometric data, serum concentrations of creatinine, and cystatin C values, as it was mentioned already in my previous slide. It looks like a complicated mathematical equation for a non-mathematical people like us. The first equation is Cockcroft-Gault equation. It is least accurate and precise to calculate glomerular filtration rate. The second equation is CKD E3E creatinine cystatin C equation. This equation is more accurate and more precise for calculation of glomerular filtration rate in general population as well as in HIV infected. So third one is the MDRD equation, which is widely used by clinical laboratories to estimate the glomerular filtration rate. Accurately estimate the glomerular filtration rate if the glomerular filtration rate is less than 60 ml per minute per 1.73 square meter body surface area. It underestimates the glomerular filtration rate in patients with GFR more than 60 ml per minute per 1.73 square meter body surface area. The next slide comes, very important slide. The widely used chronic kidney disease classification developed by National Kidney Foundation exclusively classified chronic kidney disease on the basis of glomerular filtration rate strata, that is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 CKD, or grade 1 to grade 5 CKD. This is grade 1 to grade 5 CKD. Recently published guidelines emphasizes identification of chronic kidney disease etiology and classification according to both GFR levels and in grade 1 to grade 5 and albuminuria levels in strata A1, A2 to A3. In support to these guidelines, CKD Progress Consortium has published a series of meta-analysis showing that glomerular filtration rate and albuminuria are independent and complementary predictors for CKD progression and acute kidney injury and cardiovascular mortality. This point is very important to even cardiologists. Accordingly, the colors in the table, green, yellow, orange, red, reflect the degree of risk of the clinical outcomes. In a recent study with a large cohort of HIV infected, it is observed that albuminuria of A1, that is less than 30 milligram protein loss per day, with a GFR stage of 4, that is less than 30 ml per minute, had a 6-fold greater risk of cardiovascular events compared with those without albuminuria and normal GFR. Detection of albuminuria or proteinuria is the most common and most easiest method of detecting kidney damage we can understand by this time now. The dipsticks we can measure. With the dipsticks we can measure the proteinuria for mass screening. They detect predominantly albumin only, which is a high molecular weight protein. It means dipsticks do not detect low molecular weight proteins in the urine. And also, dipsticks can substantially underestimate or overestimate the true protein excretion depending upon the hydration status of the individual. 24-hour urine collections are gold standard for measuring the urinary excretion of albumin or protein, but it is very cumbersome and collection errors may occur. The most clinically useful methods for quantification of albumin or protein excretion rates are spot albumin creatinine ratio or spot protein creatinine ratio. These correlates closely with 24-hour urine albumin protein excretion. Early morning first spot urine samples are simpler to obtain and are less prone for collection errors. This table shows mild, moderate, and severe degrees of urinary protein excretion with albumin losses in 24 hours and their respective ranges. Now, let us come to highly active antiretroviral treatment. As you know, it is in short called as, very popularly called as HART. We will go to its implications in chronic kidney disease now. First, let us have a look at the definition of HART given by Department of Health and Human Services, that is DHHS of US. HART is the treatment of HIV infected requiring the use of antiretroviral drug regimens with at least 2 and preferably 3 active drug combinations taken from 2 or more antiretroviral drug classes in order to achieve maximum and durable virological suppression and to reduce the emergence of viral resistance. This is the definition of HART. CDC, that is Center for Disease Control, categorized these total 27 clinical conditions as AIDS-defining illnesses. 14 are there, rest of these are there in this slide. These are mostly opportunistic infections and malignancies, these AIDS-defining illnesses. CDC also classified these clinical conditions shown in this slide as a non-AIDS defining illnesses. One of them is renal complications consisting of acute kidney injury, chronic kidney injury, and end-stage renal disease. As we discussed in the beginning itself, that kidney failure in HIV is mainly due to the direct effect of virus on the kidneys besides drug toxicity. Non-AIDS defining illnesses incidence is becoming higher and higher day by day than AIDS defining illnesses, even at higher CD4 counts. Hence, starting antiretroviral treatment on the moment HIV is diagnosed, that is known as test and treat, is very critical and reduces the incidence of renal injury. Data from this EuroSIDA cohort study revealed that kidney diseases are the 4th leading cause of death due to non-AIDS related illnesses in HIV population after malignancies and cardiovascular and liver disease. Now, kidney disease has become a great concern with increased incidence in HIV population. So let us know something about the history and some interesting points are there. History and evaluation of HART. First antiretroviral drug, that is pseudovodin, was introduced in 1987. 1996 was a watershed year for so many ARVs. Then the first protein inhibitor, ritonavir and indinavir, were introduced. And the era of HART has come into existence at that time. In the last few years, integrase trans inhibitors and like ritonavir, dolutegravir, and subsequently TAF, that is tenofovir alfanamide, is a prodrug of tenofovir, was approved. These recent drug additions changed the treatment outlook of CKD in HIV. Now a total of about 30 antiretroviral agents are available in the international market. Cost of the therapy was dramatically reduced from 30,000 in 1998 to 1,000 to 2,000 per month now, thanks to the Indian generic pharmaceutical industry. Pill burden also was reduced. In the beginning era of HIV, patients used to take 20 to 30 pills per day and now they got reduced to 1 to 2 pills per day. With this, patient complaints has dramatically increased. regimes are simplified with fewer toxicities, especially the renal toxicity. Next, coming to another point, when to initiate antiretroviral treatment. In 2015, START and Temprano randomized control trials, they demonstrated approximately 50% reduction in morbidity and mortality with initiation of ART at more than 500 CD4 cell counts among the HIV infected was noticed. In this trial, patients with CD4 counts more than 500 were randomized to receive antiretroviral treatment immediately after diagnosis of HIV infection versus delayed initiation of ART at lower CD4 count, that is less than 500. Basing on these randomized trials results, in 2016, ART is recommended for all HIV infected patients regardless of CD4 count. Before initiating ART in CKD patients, it is very essential to educate the patient about the importance of antiretroviral treatment and need for high levels of adherence in order to achieve treatment success. First, prepare the patient for high level adherence and explain them consequences of suboptimal adherence. Need of high level adherence is very, very critical in the treatment success. And explain the patient in detail about the treatment and treatment investigations are expensive. Treatment is for lifelong. As of now, advantages of treatment and disadvantages of not taking treatment, and explain the patient in detail for CKD patients, the progression of CKD, it goes over a period of time to end-stage renal disease, need of hemodialysis and kidney transplantation in due course. Assess the patient readiness to start the antiretroviral treatment. Educate the patient, as we said earlier, about the renal toxicities and antiretroviral agents, and caution the patient using the painkillers. Very important point. Painkillers cause a lot of kidney damage and other nephrotoxic drugs. So NSAIDs should be avoided in all CKD patients. These are the different antiretroviral treatment guidelines advocated by different statutory bodies like DHHS of USA, WHO, British HIV Association, and International AIDS Society, and National AIDS Organization of India. Previously, to start antiretroviral treatment based upon the clinical criteria and CD4 count. But now, most of the guidelines are recommending to start the antiretroviral treatment irrespective of clinical settings and CD4 count. That is test and treat. These are the two recommendations on why to initiate ART at higher CD4 count. As far as renal involvement is concerned, it was observed that 50% decrease in risk of developing CKD and lesser drug toxicities were noticed when antiretroviral treatment is initiated at high CD4 count. This histogram shows initiation of ART at different ranges of CD4 count from 50 to 500. See the recovery of CD4 after 24, 48, 96, and 144 weeks of initiation. So if ART started at more than 500 counts, the recovery rate of CD4 is very good, when compared to starting at less CD4 counts. This 3D histogram shows that the risk of kidney disease is very high when the ART started at low CD4 count. You see, at 0 to 199 started, and the risk of CKD is very high. Next, come to when to start the antiretroviral treatment. Way back in 1995, David Ho recommended to start antiretroviral treatment irrespective of CD4 count with a slogan, hit hard, hit early. But in 2000 AD, Carpenter and Harrington brought the theory of watch and wait until the CD4 count falls to 250 to 350. Because at that time, there were less number of ARVs, high cost, pill burden, and drug toxicities are more. In 2008, because of the significant increase in mortality and morbidity, the concept of previous concept is changed, and they say that it is clearly the better. And they kept the CD4 count at 340, 350 or above. Again in 2015, on the recommendation of Stark and Temprano trials, the concept of David Ho, hit hard and hit early, was brought back. Now the ART was recommended regardless of CD4 count, which is mainly because of improved survival with early initiation of ART at higher CD4 count. And other causes may be availability of number of relatively safe ARVs, more newer drug classes, less toxic drugs, and reduced cost and efficient monitoring efforts. This diagram shows the evolution cycle of antiretroviral treatment from 1995 to 2015. It becomes a cyclical event. Now, point comes to which ARV regime should be initiated in HIV patients with chronic kidney disease. Choice of ARVs with background CKD is very limited. Even though, there are so many antiretroviral medications available in the market. This is the classic picture shows various target sites. These are the target sites where the 6 mechanistic classes of antiretroviral drugs can act to prevent the right from the entry into the viral replication in the CD4 cell. So basing on that, 30 antiretroviral drugs in 7 mechanistic classes were approved by US FDA for the treatment of HIV infection in 2009. In addition, an antiretroviral pharmacokinetic enhancer, ritonavir, and non-ARV pharmacokinetic enhancer or booster, cobicistat, was approved solely to improve the pharmacokinetic profiles of some ARV drugs like protease inhibitor and integrase inhibitor, that is elvitegravir. At present, 21 ARVs in 5 classes are marketed in India. Some classes like fusion inhibitors, and these are the classes available in India. So like fusion inhibitors and some cobicistat, non-ARV pharmacokinetic cobicistats are not available in India. Out of all, renal friendly drugs are very limited, maybe around 10. Selection of ARV regime should be individualized. It should be based on comorbid states like CKD, drug toxicities, and resistance patterns. In some situations, an alternative regime may actually be a preferred regime for some patients with coexistent CKD. Majority of fixed dose combinations or co-formulated antiretroviral drugs may not be suitable or appropriate in comorbid chronic kidney disease because of individual drug dosage conflicts. Hence, pill burden, sometimes patient has to take more number of drugs, then pill burden may become an additional problem in treating HIV in chronic kidney disease. Sometimes we can't handle drug resistance that easily in chronic kidney disease patients, as the renal-friendly ARV options are very limited. Then the task becomes selecting an antiretroviral drug. The task becomes more tougher with comorbid CKD. Sometimes multiple comorbidities will be there, like diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, altered liver function, Hep B, Hep C, along with CKD. Sometimes they produce much more alarming state for the patient as well as to the treating physician in choosing the regimen. The recommended non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor based first line ART regimes in the treatment HIV with CKD is abacavir plus lamivudine with dolutegravir. Abacavir, lamivudine plus dolutegravir. Recommended this regime in a patient if the patient is HLA-B 5701 negative. If the creatinine clearance is less than 50 ml per minute, do not use co-formulated abacavir lamivudine because lamivudine requires dose adjustment. If creatinine clearance is less than 30 ml per minute, don't use tenofovir alafenamide, that is TAF. This is the recommended protease inhibitor or integrase inhibitor based second line regime for chronic kidney disease patients when abacavir, TAF, and tenofovir can't be used. So then the options are limited. Use dolutegravir and lamivudine or ritonavir boosted dolutegravir and lamivudine or ritonavir boosted dolutegravir and raltegravir in 1 BD doses if the CD4s are more than 200 and viral loads are less than 1 lakh. So abacavir has an advantage. So abacavir with dose adjusted lamivudine may be given in renal impairment patients. But the ACTG 5202 trial showed an inferior virologic response in patients with baseline viral loads are more than 1 lakh when abacavir and lamivudine were given with efavirenz or ritonavir boosted etazanavir as compared with tenofovir and entrectinib. This difference luckily was not seen with abacavir and lamivudine when they were combined with dolutegravir. Abacavir may cause sometimes a life-threatening hypersensitivity reaction in patients who are positive for HLA-B5701. Abacavir use has been associated with cardiac events in some observational studies. So previously abacavir used to cost more, now the costs have come down. The disadvantage is abacavir is always available in combination with lamivudine, except 1 or 2 companies are manufacturing plain abacavir. A few words about the TAF, tenofovir alafenamide in CK. TAF is a prodrug of tenofovir disoproxil fumarate, that is TDF. It is proved that it is non-inferior to tenofovir in virological suppression. It is more favorable renal. It is having a more favorable renal and bone side effect profile. It is recommended to HIV infected with significant proteinuria or renal impairment at baseline. With TAF, potential reverse of renal toxicity observed in 6 studies from tenofovir to TAF. So for tenofovir, no dosage adjustment is required in chronic kidney disease. TAF is not recommended if the GFR is less than 30 ml per minute. That is with end-stage kidney disease. Next, coming to CCR5 antagonists and fusion inhibitors like neravirate and enfuvirtide. CCR5 antagonists and fusion inhibitors can be safely given. They are renal friendly to CKD patients. No dosage adjustments are needed in chronic kidney disease. But neravirate requires cortisone assay before initiation of therapy. Fusion inhibitor enfuvirtide should be given only subcutaneously and is very, very expensive and presently not available in India. This is about tenofovir toxicity. Antiretroviral agents are very well known to have the potential to cause nephrotoxicity. Among the current antiretroviral agents, the most important nephrotoxic drug is tenofovir. Antiretroviral nephrotoxicity constitutes approximately 6% of chronic kidney disease cases in HIV infected, as we have discussed earlier. Nephrotoxicity from tenofovir encompasses several patterns of kidney injury, including the proximal tubular dysfunction, acute kidney injury, chronic kidney disease, and nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. The proximal tubular dysfunction is an important among these, resulting from drug-induced mitochondrial DNA depletion that is mediated by accumulation of drugs within the proximal renal tubules. Excessive drug accumulation may be facilitated by genetic polymorphisms in the drug transport mechanism. Proximal tubular dysfunction rarely may progress to Fanconi syndrome, a complete tubulopathy that includes metabolic acidosis and bone disorder. Decrease in glomerular filtration rate with tenofovir is due to inhibition of tubular secretion of creatine, as usually happens with TMP-SMS, that is trimethoprim sulfamic acid, Ceplan, Bactrim, etc. Tenofovir nephrotoxicity causes greater glomerular filtration rate reduction in number of observational studies and was associated with about 16 to 55% relative increase in incidence of CKD. Greater GFR declines were observed in that study when the tenofovir is combined with ritonavir boosted protease inhibitors like atazanavir and lopinavir. The risk factor of tenofovir toxicity includes advanced disease, old age, low BMI, increased tenofovir plasma levels, pre-existing renal disease with comorbid states like diabetes mellitus and hypertension, etc. We discussed about the genetic predisposition. And the concomitant use of cobicistat, a non-pharmacological boosting agent, is an integrase inhibitor. So renal function should be monitored periodically as like anybody. Those people taking with tenofovir is no exception. So renal function should be monitored periodically in patients who are pre-existing renal impairment during treatment with tenofovir. Tenofovir should be generally avoided if creatinine clearance falls below 60 ml per minute. If at all tenofovir is used, dosage should be adjusted according to the creatinine clearance value. Sometimes tenofovir nephrotoxicity will not be observed in some patients. Nephrotoxicity is not observed in tenofovir when it is given to non-HIV infected individuals like chronic hepatitis B infection, or when it is used for PrEP. PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis used in HIV uninfected. Or IPREX. IPREX is wife and husband chemoprophylaxis for HIV prevention in serodiscordant male to female partner to prevent the intercourse transmission. This table shows various markers of proximal tubular dysfunction of tenofovir toxicity. Several observational studies reported statistically significant higher levels, at least one biomarker, in subjects taking tenofovir compared with subjects not taking tenofovir. These are the biomarkers. Various markers are proximal tubular dysfunction are serum markers and urinary markers. In serum markers, you should check for hypokalemia, low serum bicarbonate, and hypophosphatemia. Check for the markers in urine. Check for the markers in the urine. That is glycosuria with normal serum glucose. And next one is increased fractional excretion of phosphorus, are highly specific for proximal tubular dysfunction. But however, these manifestations are very uncommon in day-to-day clinical practice. So their absence does not exclude the tenofovir toxicity. So proteinuria includes both albumin and low molecular weight proteins. For example, urinary beta-2 macroglobulin. Urinary beta-2 macroglobulin. Low molecular weight proteins are filtered at glomeruli but are mostly reabsorbed by proximal tubules. In case of proximal tubule dysfunction is there, the presence of increased amounts of low molecular weight proteins like beta-2 macroglobulin in the urine may more quantity may indicate proximal tubular dysfunction, whereas substantial levels of albuminuria usually indicate the glomerular disease. This is the proximal renal tubule. Next, come to the toxicities of NRTS and NNRTS and PS. Usually, these NNRTS they won't cause kidney injury, but in that abacavir is very renal friendly. So, very rarely acute interstitial nephritis is reported with abacavir, but it is very, very rare. NNRTS like our efavirenz and nevirapine, they are not known to cause any renal toxicity. Protease inhibitors, very, very important to observe. Immunavir causes nephrolithiasis, obstructive uropathy, intratubular drug deposition, crystalluria in 20% of the cases, renal colic because of kidney stone disease, papillary necrosis, acute interstitial nephritis, acute kidney injury, or chronic kidney. Ritonavir, sakinavir, nelsinavir, lopinavir, they all produce kidney stones, nephrolithiasis, and because of the nephrolithiasis, obstructive uropathy and acute kidney. Atazanavir, acute interstitial fibrosis, chronic granulomatous tubulointerstitial nephritis, and nephrolithiasis. All the protein inhibitors more or less will cause kidney stones. That study found 20 to 13% increase of risk of CKD with the cumulative use of either ritonavir boosted atazanavir or ritonavir boosted lopinavir respectively. So, with atazanavir 22%, with lopinavir 13% risk of CKD. Coming to integrase inhibitors and other newer classes of ARVs that are already, we said it is safe in CKD. As per the conclusions of SPRINGS 2 study, dolutegravir does not impact the glomerular filtration rate or renal blood flow. But dolutegravir may increase the serum creatinine levels by 10 to 14% initially in the first 1 to 2 weeks of therapy. The rise of serum creatinine with dolutegravir is reversible and non-pathological. Elvitegravir, when used with cobicistat, as we said, it is a non-pharmacological boosting agent, known to increase the creatinine levels by inhibition of tubular secretion of creatinine. Entry inhibitors and CCR5 antagonists are really renal friendly or renal safe. Sometimes low vitamin D levels, hypovitaminosis D deficiency causes renal insufficiency, especially when the patients are on ritonavir or efavirenz containing resins. This is the cobicistat. Cobicistat inhibits the tubular excretion of creatinine, which results in increase in creatinine levels, decrease in estimated GFR, but no effect on actual GFR. So it is non-pathogenic with decreased creatinine clearance. Cobicistat may increase the risk of, when it is combined with tenofovir, it increases the risk of nephrotoxicity. So probably the problem is cobicistat is currently available as a co-formulation with elvitegravir, emtricitabine, and tenofovir outside India. So tenofovir is the culprit here. When to switch? When to switch the regime in CKD patients? So there are some conditions. If there is a rapid fall in creatinine clearance below 30 ml per minute, you do either dosage adjustment of the particular ARV, or should be done, or else the regime should be switched as far as A2SAFR1. So you have to switch. Even if we do all the things, sometimes failure does occur. It's not a surprise. It is a guarantee. So multiple failures, having multiple failures with background CKD, lot of confusion sets in what to do, what not to do. Then the options are second, third, fourth, and so on and so forth as per the genotypic resistant assays. But genotypic assays are not that easy, not that available, not that affordable in our resource-restricted settings. Without genotypic resistant testing, we have to presume the probable working antiretroviral regimen blindly and advocate. This table shows the usual daily doses of nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors and their reduced doses in CKD as per the degree of risk. This is the daily doses. These are the NRTIs. These are the usual daily doses. These are the reduced daily dosages in CKD. This table shows usual same NRTIs and their reduced dosages in CKD as per the degree of creatine clearance. This table shows the usual daily dose of the NNRTIs, efavirenz and nevirapine, and their reduced doses in CKD as per the degree of creatine clearance. This shows the usual daily doses of protease inhibitors, etazanavir, darunavir, fosmantinavir, indinavir, lopinavir, nelfinavir, retinavir, saxinavir, trypnavir, and their reduced dosages in CKD as per the degree of creatine clearance. For integrase inhibitors, no dosage adjustment is required in renal failure patients. Even for no dosage adjustments are required for CCR5 exogenous naravirus or fusion inhibitor, enforcidin, enfuvirtide in CKD. Next, coming to the role of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers in CKD. So, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers can reduce the proteinuria and slow down the loss of kidney function in patients with proteinuria less than 30 milligram per day in diabetic subjects, diabetic HAE subjects, and more than 30 milligram, 300 milligram per day in non-diabetic HAE subjects. In addition to reducing the proteinuria, ACE inhibitors reduce the risk of non-fatal cardiovascular events like in general population. Combination therapy with ACE inhibitors and ARBs may reduce proteinuria drastically and systolic blood pressure also to a greater extent. But there is a greater risk of hypertension, syncope, acute kidney injury, cough, and hyperkalemic agents. Usually some nephrologists prescribe, but some cardiologists will against this. There are no studies on efficacy of statins in HIV-infected persons with chronic kidney disease, but as like in general population, there is a consistent evidence of cardiovascular risk reduction with statins. So statins have an important drug to in HIV thing. Statins is having important drug-drug reactions with protease inhibitors, especially. Trial data from chronic kidney disease population show that aspirin reduces the risk of cardiovascular events, and its use should be balanced against the risk of bleeding. Blood pressure target should be kept at 140/90 if proteinuria is less than 30 milligram per day. BP should be kept below 130/80 if proteinuria is up to 300 milligram per day to get cardiovascular and of course the renal protection. What about steroids? Steroids are indicated in HIV-associated nephropathy. And consider corticosteroids as an adjuvant to antiretroviral therapy, ACE and ARBs in the biopsy-proven cases of HIV-associated nephropathy. Corticosteroids may reduce kidney disease progression in HIV-associated nephropathy. Corticosteroid treatment in HIV-associated nephropathy is not associated with increase in emergence of new opportunistic infections. Vascular necrosis is very common if you use steroids. It is so common that there is a 4 to 7-fold higher with steroid treatment in HIV-associated nephropathy. Steroids are not indicated in HIV immune complement kidney disease. Finally, coming to kidney transplantation. Kidney transplantation in HIV infected with end-stage renal disease once upon a time it was considered, it is experimental a decade back. However, present data indicate that high rates of patient and graft survival can be achieved in selected patients. Although the risk of acute graft rejection is consistently being found to be higher in HIV infected compared with a non-HIV subject. Consider kidney transplant for improvement in quality of life in all HIV infected persons with ESRD or imminent ESRD based on the eligibility. What are the eligibility factors? Previous history, of course, it is not there. Other comorbid states like hepatitis B, hepatitis C should be on stable ART regime. Current immune status, the present CD4 count should be good, and viral load should be bleed detectable level. And in early experience, any prior opportunistic infections are considered to be a contraindication for organ transplantation. But now these restrictions have been liberalized with the exclusion of some exceptions like progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy, that is PML, chronic intestinal cryptosporidiasis, primary CNS lymphoma, or visceral hepatitis, most of the mild diseases. Close therapeutic drug monitoring is required with acrolimus, cyclosporine, and sirolimus. These are all the immunosuppressants used in the post-transplant period, and the dose adjustments are needed with the antiretroviral when they are used, especially with protease inhibitors and NNRT. Meravirac, dolutegravir, and NRTs are recommended in post-transplant period to minimize the drug-drug interactions with the post-transplant immunosuppressants. Finally, coming to the present day crisis, SARS. So HIV SARS-CoV-2, what is the position of kidney? Kidney disease is among the patients with COVID-19 can manifest as acute kidney injury, hematuria, and proteinuria. Acute kidney injury will have a higher risk of mortality. If it is, if somebody with SARS-CoV-2 infection, if he develops AK, means the risk is very more. People living with HIV, not on ART, may be at a greater risk of getting SARS-CoV-2 infection. But on the contrary, people living with HIV and AIDS on effective antiretrovirals may be at relatively lesser risk. Some observational studies are telling this. Getting SARS-CoV-2 infection probably due to some unknown favorable effects attributed by heart. We don't know that. Epidemiological and observational data revealed acute kidney injury was seen in 14.5 to 15% of all COVID-infected cases with severe SARS-CoV-2 infection and have a higher mortality rate of 60 to 90%. So this data is from the non-HIV subjects. Acute kidney injury was nearly universal, more than 90% in patients who are mechanically ventilated. Once a patient of SARS-CoV went onto the ventilator, kidney is gone. In COVID-19 infection, acute kidney injury is an independent risk factor for mortality. Coming to the drugs, the remdesivir. So remdesivir is used in moderate to severe degree of HIV symptoms. Presently, no data on renal safety of remdesivir is available as of now. Finally, the take-home message is HIV infected is at an increased risk of getting chronic kidney disease. Non-infectious comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, hepatitis C virus, and dyslipidemias are increasingly more prevalent than HIV-associated nephropathy, making CKD in HIV is more complicated with poor outcomes, causing higher morbidity and mortality. Potentially nephrotoxic antiretroviral treatment should be avoided in high-risk cases. Early identification of chronic kidney disease is very, very important by efficient screening, and prompt treatment is crucial for better outcomes. Initiate antiretroviral treatment regardless of CD4 count to prevent renal complications. Lifestyle modifications and prompt control of diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, cessation of smoking, weight reduction, these are all mandatory. Be wise, kidney wise. Be wise, kidney wise, protect kidneys. Be wise, kidney wise, protect kidneys from HIV. Be wise, kidney wise, protect kidneys from HIV and antiretroviral agents. Thanks. Thanks for your patience here.
So, sir, thank you for this very insightful talk. Your talk clearly reflects your rich 3.5 decades of clinical experience. I believe all the participants got some takeaways from your talk, which is going to help them in their day-to-day clinical practice. I got
Thank
few
you.
questions. I know you are a little rushed, but I'll read out some important questions I got. First question from Dr. Pavan from Nalakunda, Telangana. Sir, I got a patient who failed on ZLN and currently on dialysis thrice a week. Which second line ART I should use?
So here, the patient is on dialysis. So TAF is not contraindicated. They can use lamivudine at a reduced doses, and of course, dolutegravir, lamivudine, very limited. Lamivudine and dolutegravir are for, and of course, we can use first line NRTS like judovidine and D40, but the other toxicities like bone marrow toxicity and neurological toxicity, better to use the integrase inhibitor and of course lamivudine. Lamivudine, integrase inhibitor. Lamivudine should be used with reduction doses, like you can give him half the dose in the beginning if the creatinine clearance is about 60 to 45, or if the 150 milligrams if the creatinine clearance is 30, and if the creatinine clearance is less than 25, we can give 50 milligrams alternate day. And of course, abacavir dose requirement is not necessary.
Thank you for that, doctor. Thank you for that. So I got a question about others from Belgaum. Which second line drug can they be given in renal dysfunction?
So as I said in this, the most, if the patient is HLA-B5701 negative, they can be switched to abacavir, and with the titrated doses as per the GFR, lamivudine. And another thing is a dolutegravir. Dolutegravir dosage requirement is not, the dosage adjustment requirement is not necessary. All the drugs like Maraviroc and all the those drugs are there, but they are expensive. So let us, in the first line, drugs for renal friendly drugs are mostly abacavir, dolutegravir, and lamivudine with reduced doses.
Thank you, sir. There's a question from Ludhiana by Dr. Lal Bhushan.
Yes.
Among the protease inhibitors, which one is safest? All protease inhibitors, which is the safest to be given in kidney dysfunction situation?
So there is lot of data. Overall, protease inhibitors will try to avoid. And now the present era, protease inhibitors are gradually fading out. So better avoid atazanavir, because that study and all are telling that atazanavir more nephrotoxic when combined with other agents. Better is darunavir.
Thank you. Sir, I have a question about Achyut from Nandir. How does HIV/AIDS affect kidney?
No, I told in the beginning itself, because HIV affects in two ways: by entering into the CD4 cells and causing destruction of CD4 cells, in turn causes the immunosuppression. And another way is, right from the beginning, circulating HIV will directly affect some organs like kidney, brain, heart, liver, etc. So HIV-associated nephropathy, HIV-associated cardiomyopathy, and all these PML and all, progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy, these are all the direct effects of virus. And directly it affects, not with lower CD4 counts, not with the immunosuppression is not the cause for kidney damage, mostly in HIV subjects. It's a direct
Thank you.
effect on.
Thank you, Doctor. So I have a question from Dr. Wasim from Faridabad.
Right.
He is telling, how often we should check for the kidney profile in ARV patients who are on medications.
It depends. If the patient is on a renotoxic medication like tenofovir and in the reduced doses, they should test frequent. The most frequently tested and convenient is urinary protein excretion. That is with spot urine spot protein creatinine ratio, which is totally most of the practitioners will ignore. So urinary excretion of protein is a very vital and not simple urinary estimation, routine urine examination. Get a urine protein creatinine ratio periodically once in 3 months to 6 months, depending upon the need. If the patient having more of albuminuria or creatinine rise is borderline, get a frequent testing of either protein creatinine ratio or simple protein estimations. And of course, the eGFR, estimated GFR. Estimated GFR is also very crucial. The GFR and proteinuria are the very important markers to detect the kidney failure very early. If you detect the early kidney failure, patient is saved from the CKD.
Thank you, Doctor. There's a question from Dr. Prabhakar from Nizamabad. What is eGFR?
eGFR is an estimated GFR. Actually, GFR means glomerular filtration rate. Glomerular filtration rate, how we should do? We should do with collection of 24 hours urinary. In that 24 hours urinary urine protein level, exact amount of protein is estimated, but it is cumbersome. We have to collect all the time. You have to stay in the home to collect the 24 hours urine. So to prevent that, to overcome that, it is estimated. Estimated means with a mathematical equation, we can estimate. We'll take a urinary protein and serum protein, urinary creatinine and serum creatinine with a different 3 mathematical equations. I told that 3 mathematical equations by taking the age, sex, and the body surface area of the patient, some anthropometric data. In laboratory, they calculate through a mathematical equation. That is called eGFR. eGFR means estimated GFR. Estimated GFR, say suppose it is point. If estimated GFR is a ratio, estimated GFR, they give in 60 ml. If the estimated GFR is less than 60, you can say it is CKD. So normal estimated GFR is 60 to 90 to 120 ml is a normal range.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Ranjan from Cochin asks, which is the most accurate parameter? Is it eGFR or other parameter like proteinuria? Which one is relay more?
Yeah, which is most accurate parameter is renal isotopic study. So if you do a renal technetium 99M, so there is a renal tracing element. So they attach the tracer, technetium mostly, technetium 99M, and they do a radioisotope renogram. Radioisotope renogram studies will reveal the accurate kidney function. So these are all GFRs, estimated GFRs. These are all inulin. Previously, in the olden days, they do it inulins. So now the best way, it is all not practically possible doing all these things. So a very important and simple is spot urine protein creatinine ratio. So simple early morning sample, do a serum creatinine according to the age and sex of the patient, they calculate. So the spot urine protein creatinine ratio will give a little idea, but good mathematical calculation, proper sampling, collection of sample is also very crucial.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Suresh Kumar from Hyderabad says, sir, excellent deliberation. You made this complex topic so simple. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Ishwar from Delhi asks, nowadays I'm getting some young patient coming with kidney issues. What is your opinion? Because otherwise we thought elderly patients are more prone to have kidney issues.
Not like that. Any age is not a bar for kidney disease. There are so many kidney patients even at the younger age. So many kidney patients at the age of 6, 8 years also, they got transplants and all. But the incidence of kidney failure is not that as common as in the middle age group. But because younger age, the most common problems are nephratics. Nephratics, there are different ways of nephrotic problems like minimal lesion glomerulonephritis, rapidly progressive IgA nephropathy. These children, mostly in first decade or second decade of life, IgA nephropathy is common. So IgA nephropathy and crescentic rapidly progressive nephropathies, these are all glomerulonephropathies. These will have some rapid prognosis, rapid deterioration, and a bad prognosis. Some of these things. Some, unlike minimal lesion glomerulonephritis, they will have a good prognosis. At what age they got, and there are so many factors. In familial history is also important. So in children, kidney disease is not uncommon.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Dr. Sachin from Delhi asked, effect of COVID-19 on people living with HIV and what measures need to be taken after the infection?
So nothing in general, there's nothing particular. First thing is you have to keep your viral loads under control. So it should be below detectable. And another thing, as like any other general population, all the social distancing, washing of the hands, all general hygienic measures should be followed. And HIV patients with COVID, they have to keep the stocks of antiretroviral medicines at least for 3 months. Because in these situations, because so much of industry, pharmaceutical industry, they are not running well, and we are not getting raw materials from China, there is a possibility that stocks may not be properly supplied in future. That's why always, instead of keeping 1 month stocks of ARV medicines, better to keep 3 month stocks.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any more questions. So with your kind permission, I would like to share one initiative and development from Mylan. Number one, as all of you know, the remdesivir is a drug recently approved for the use of moderate to severe COVID cases. Mylan is soon coming up with remdesivir next week at the affordable price.
Right.
Also, you know, in this COVID situation, where we can't meet doctors, which we have been doing from ages. So Mylan has launched a digital platform called Dizikin. Thereby, with that, we can be in touch with our doctors at regular interval through meaningful content. Lastly, once again, sincere thank to Dr. Satyanarayana for spending a Sunday morning with us. It was an excellent talk from Mylan. I can say we'd love to have you in future webinar to make complex topics simple, as Dr. Suresh has mentioned. Thank you, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you.